Hi everyone and welcome to week 4. I am your instructor Crashu, and this week we're going to be covering some of the topics that a lot of people usually want to know when they get into lucid dreaming, which is wake back to bed and wild. So we're going to start with wake back to bed. It involves using an alarm in the middle of the night to wake yourself up. It's not an actual technique for inducing lucidity, but it's used with the other techniques like mild and wild to actually induce lucidity. Uh, if you have a hard time getting to sleep, it's very variable, but it can take a great toll on your sleep, so you need to know how and when you can use it. Some people should probably only use it maybe on weekend nights. Other people can probably afford to use it whenever they want. If you have an easy time falling asleep, you probably won't have much of an issue with wake back to bed. But it will take around 20 minutes to an hour more of your sleep each night. So we'll get to explaining that in just a second. If you sleep around 8 hours, you're going to want to set your alarm for about 4.5 or 6 hours after you fall asleep. The reason for this is these are the times where you're going to be able to wake yourself right out of REM and be able to eventually get right back into REM, which is important for not only mild, but most importantly for wild. If you don't sleep around 8 hours, if you sleep less than that, well, wake back to bed is going to require an additional 20 minutes to an hour of your nighttime routine. So it may not be the best technique for you, but you can still try it out if you have the time and if it's not going to affect your sleep schedule that much. It's up to you. And if you sleep more than 8 hours, then uh, it will probably, wake back to bed will probably work really well for you. The thing is, if you're not sleeping about 8 hours, those are just the recommended times above. When you naturally awake in the night, pay attention to the times that you're naturally awake in the middle of the night. And the time period where you do that the most is probably going to be where you want to set your alarm for the wake back to bed. But 4.5 or 6 hours after you fall asleep is generally a good idea. And the key word is fall asleep because it can take you, for me, it takes a half hour, 45 minutes to actually fall asleep at night. That's one of the reasons wake back to bed doesn't work that well for me. So make sure it's 4.5, 6 hours after you actually fall asleep, not the time that you go to bed. If you don't know how long it takes you to fall asleep, it's probably not going to be that big of a deal. I guess most people are within 30 minutes, but I don't know. So with wake back to bed, once your alarm goes off in the middle of the night, you're going to get out of bed. You can usually you're supposed to stay up for about 20 minutes, no more than an hour. For somebody like me, I can't fall asleep, so I have to basically go right back to sleep soon. But the things you do while you're out of bed for that 20 minutes or an hour is you write down your dreams in your dream journal, you use the bathroom. Anything to do with lucid dreaming is stuff you should be doing, reading about it, maybe visiting online forums, maybe going and doing parts of this course on the online, whatever you need to do, but it should all be very mild and relaxing. Nothing should be too stimulating. The point of this is to get your mind awake, but not really your body that much. Uh, if you have a hard time falling asleep, like I said, 20 minutes to an hour doesn't really work. Somebody like me, I won't ever be able to get back asleep for the rest of the night. So try like 5 minutes or less. You just get up, maybe use the bathroom if you got to go, or just write down some dream journal things, or just get a glass of water. Anything that's just mild doesn't really require much. For those who have an extremely hard time getting back to sleep, you could try Can Wild, which I'm going to explain in a little while. And basically, it's just an alarm that turns itself off so that you don't have to get up out of bed. And as you fall back asleep, after you're done with your wake back to bed, you perform mild. And this is an effective technique for getting lucid dreams a lot more often. So now we're going to go ahead and cover wild, which is basically always used with wake back to bed. You're not going to want to use wild as you fall asleep because simply it's just not going to work. I mean, wild requires you to be going into an REM sleep stage, and when you're falling asleep at night, you're not going straight into REM. So even though there are a few people who once in a great while can get a wild when they fall asleep initially at night, it's unlikely to even be a very good lucid dream or anything like that, 'cause it's probably going to fall apart very quickly. You have to be going into an REM cycle already, and that's why you use wake back to bed to do wild. You can also use it during a nap. I don't take naps. I don't know how to do this technique, but from everything I've read, you want to sleep like 5 minutes, wake yourself up, and then use wild. And naps are usually an excellent opportunity to use wild and become lucid. So CamWild is simply using an alarm that turns itself off. I know there's a free alarm app that has this feature on the Android Play Store. I don't know about iPhone, but I'm pretty sure there's one for the iPhone too. Uh, Basically, though, CamWild is going to allow you to stay still when you wake up, like you do with Dream Recall, and then you can use mild, wild, or any of the other techniques that we'll eventually cover in this course as well. Uh, Easier. That way, you're waking yourself up in the middle of a prime time for going into REM, but you're not waking up your body so much that it's impossible to fall back asleep. Wild is very different for everyone, and each attempt that you use it, it may not always work the same way. This is really because of things like sleep paralysis and hypnagogic hallucinations. Uh, those are really they can change each time. I don't think I've even had it very consistent each time I've used it, which makes it kind of fun, but it also means you have to be ready for things to change each time you use wild. So the first step in wild is after well, first of all, you had to have done something like wake back to bed. You don't have to do wake back to bed. Like I said, something like CanWild works as well. But don't do this right before you fall asleep initially at night. So anyways, when you're doing wild, first step you're going to do is you're going to lay back. Typically on the back is the best position, but you can do wilds on any position. If you lay on your stomach or on your side, you can do wild there too. I'm not experienced with doing it that way, but it really shouldn't be any different. Most people prefer to do it on their back though. So the first step is relaxation. You're going to relax your entire body. And if you know of any relaxation techniques, you can go ahead and use those for relaxing your body. Um, One of the ways that I do it usually, I honestly forget to do relaxation half the time. Uh, but you start with your toes, you concentrate on them, kind of try to feel some tenseness in your toes, wiggle them a little bit, and then let the tenseness come out of them. Then you do that with your feet, and then with your ankles, and then with your legs, and then with your stomach, your chest, your shoulders, your arms, your hands, your fingers, your face, all that kind of stuff. You go ahead and just you feel some tenseness in each body part, wiggle it a little bit or move it a little bit, and then let the tension out, and then just move on to the next body part until you've done your entire body. I believe there's a nice detailed way of doing it from some kind of like Tibetan dream yoga in Stephen LaBerge's book. So if you want to look that up, but there's also plenty of relaxation techniques online you can look up as well. Once you've relaxed yourself, you're going to start preparing to enter the lucid dream, and this is where the fun stuff happens. Well, maybe not for everyone, but in my opinion, this is where the fun stuff happens. This is where you're going to possibly experience sleep paralysis, and you should probably be experiencing hypnagogic hallucinations, although it's possible you won't. Um, if you have an itch or you need to swallow or something during this time, you just got to do it and then go back to using wild. It's annoying because sometimes it can break like the hypnagogic hallucinations and sleep paralysis, but you got to do what you got to do. Concentrating on that will break your wild attempts, so you need to itch with the itch or swallow. Um, so basically, you're going to imagine, for me, there's multiple ways of doing this, first of all. So if you want to look up any other ways, I'll have links to some of the wild techniques out there and everything so you can see different ways to do it. For me, I imagine a flight of stairs. I start climbing each stair and I count each stair one at a time. So I go one, climb to the second stair with only 1 foot, two, then use my other foot onto the next stair, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I keep doing that until hypnagogic hallucinations show up. And hypnagogic hallucinations can be sights, sounds, anything. They're basically hallucinations. They can seem extremely lifelike, and sometimes you can get scared by one or freaked out by one a little bit and wake up from it. That's not a big deal. You just keep going back to, imagining the flight of stairs, and you just keep trying to enter the lucid dream. As far as hypnagogic hallucinations go, like I've said before, I haven't used Wild a lot, but I have used it a few times. One of the things I had one time was that my teeth felt like they were grinding together, which really freaked me out. And another time I couldn't breathe. In reality, I was actually breathing in real life, but I felt like I couldn't breathe. And those two were the ones that really freaked me out. But I've had other really fun ones where like I feel like I'm falling. I just start like plummeting down, straight down through my bed into like this endlessness, and that's a really fun one. It doesn't sound as creepy as maybe that description sounded, but there's a lot of fun ones. I've heard one time I was trying to do it, and all of a sudden I thought I heard my parents speaking right outside my bedroom. I'm like, what? And then I wake up, I'm like, oh man, that was hypnagogic hallucinations. No wonder that wasn't making a lot of sense. One of the things that does happen when you start getting these hallucinations, you can get really excited because you're like, oh yeah, I'm that close to a lucid dream. So you got to keep your excitement in check. Otherwise, uh, you might break yourself out of the hypnagogic hallucinations. And if you do, you just go back to continuing your attempts to get into the lucid dream. And then the third step is you're going to enter the dream, and at this point, the hypnagogic hallucinations start to become more dreamlike. And once you actually are in, you'll start to see basically a difference between just some hallucinations, some feelings, vibrations, stuff like that. You'll actually see an entire dream scene form around you. At that point, you simply walk into the dream however you want. There's different methods. You can literally just will yourself into the dream. There's like a second body method that I've used before, and basically you imagine yourself lying in bed, and that's where your dream scene is. And you imagine yourself coming out of your body in a second body, and that's a popular technique to enter them. Oftentimes, when you do Wild, you'll find yourself in your bedroom. Not always, but oftentimes. And so, doing that, that's why the second body technique. You're lying in bed, you come out. But there's other techniques to enter it. You got to find what works for you. Simply like when I'm imagining walking up the stairs, for me, simply just walking around in the lucid dream and doing a reality check works for me. So that's it for Wake Back to Bed and Wild. There's different variants of Wild that we'll be covering in a few weeks, and there's different ways to do Wild itself. And I'm going to have links to Wake Back to Bed and Wild tutorials and everything online, and you can search yourself for those if you want to. And those will give you different methods. I just gave you the methods that I use. In all honesty, I never use Wake Back to Bed because I can't fall back asleep. But if you can fall back asleep, Wake Back to Bed should work really well for you. Um, you can also find more information about these techniques, not only on the sites I've linked to, but Mild, Wake Back to Bed, and Wild is what's really covered in Stephen LaBerge's Exploring the World of Lucid Dreaming. In addition, he covers things like Tibetan Dream Yoga, which I'm not going to be covering here, and there's some techniques from that are basically similar to Wild that can help you enter a lucid dream as well. I've tried using them; they haven't really succeeded for me, but seeing as though they've been around for like I believe a couple thousand years, they're pretty probably reliable. Your homework for this week is to attempt to do Wake Back to Bed and Wild, at least for this week. You can keep it up as long as you want. Hopefully you're going to still do Mild. If you're not comfortable with Wild, if it just doesn't work for you, and you can do Wake Back to Bed, then do Wake Back to Bed with Mild instead. Um, and do either combination you want or any kind of combination. Just be warned that Wake Back to Bed plus Wild can take a toll on your sleeping schedule if you have a hard time getting back to sleep. Basically, if you sleep 8 hours, you're going to need probably like 9 hours of sleep time instead, simply because you're awake for about 20-40 minutes of that night. If you're doing Wake Back to Bed for only 5 minutes, you can still fall back asleep, then you're probably not going to have that significant of a alteration to your sleep schedule. Just be warned of how it can alter your sleep schedule so that you don't not get enough sleep. So you guys have a good week and good luck getting lucid.